Hey friends, this is Morgan from Okashi, and I'm doing a brief intro before the actual video that you can see behind me of our conversation with Anke Liu from the Stellar Community Fund at the Paris Blockchain Week 2024. This is a long conversation and we touch on a lot of topics about the history of Stellar Community Fund. I learned a lot and I hope you enjoy the video and learn from it too. There are some rough cuts because there was a PA announcer doing all kinds of announcements. I'm not a professional editor. Apologize for those. All right, that's it. Go enjoy the video, and I'll catch you later. Bye. Hey everyone, my name is Morgan from Okashi, and today with me I have
Anke Liu, Ecosystem Growth Lead at the Stellar Development Foundation.
You might know Anke better as the lead of the Stellar Community Fund.
Well, as well as Gemma, so no.
There you go.
Yeah.
But you're sort of the OG face of the whole thing.
Yes. I've been at Stellar Development Foundation for like 4 years now, which is
4
crazy.
years. Okay.
Joined in like early 2020, like more on like also like in-person events, believe it or not. And we were in the office for like I think a few days. And like my manager then was like, we're gonna hit the ground running. Like we have Paris Blockchain Week, we have New York City Blockchain Week, and then 3 days later, well, it was 2020, so COVID happened.
Everything
went down, and it was all virtual events and programs from then on. So
okay, so
that's been really interesting.
We're gonna hit the Genesis story a little bit.
All right, let's do it.
But beforehand, I just want to mention sort of the way you know that you're the face of a thing is by the number of mentions on Discord that. Like, at Anke, I'm having this kind of problem with my submission. At Anke, where's my reply to the submission? And you see a lot of that. So like that's how you know, Gemma is being tagged pretty often now too.
Yeah.
But you know, that harassment level is when you know that you've made it.
No harassment. No, like people have good questions, you know, like, and it's like, I mean, I'm pretty front facing. I guess I just like communicating and just engaging with community members and really trying to understand their problems and like help ideate on solutions. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to help, but obviously like glad to have Gemma here. And also like, I mean, great community members who are just able to jump in. I'm just like always so happy when I just see like, when I didn't have like an hour or 2 hours that I didn't look at Discord, and then there's actually like Morgan or like Matthias or like Silence or Area Dev, you know, that just went in and just like answered the question exactly like how the rules are, and it just made me so happy, you know?
Nothing to do, like hands free.
Yeah.
So the concept of these talks is sort of founder stories, and you can look at this sort of as a meta founder story, where you're not creating an actual startup, but you're creating the machine that helps create other startups.
Yeah.
And I always go back to the Y Combinator as a comparison.
Yeah, you just mentioned it like 3 or 5 times every day during like these structured discussions.
I love that fact, but I understand that it's not like 100% match one for one.
Yeah.
But so the journey starts at the inception of the idea.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the time when Stellar Community Fund was not a thing? At Anke, where's my submission? It was not a thing. What was the impetus for starting what you were doing right now daily?
So like you're asking like how like the SCF got started, basically?
Yes, well, sort of your part with the active sort of monthly round, rapid iteration.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting. I mean, the Stellar Community Fund, I mean, had a predecessor called the Stellar Build Challenge, which has been around since 2016, believe it or not. And so the Stellar Community Fund actually got started in 2019 when I believe like the team back then, I wasn't there yet, but the team back then was really like, well, like we've done a few rounds of the Stellar Build Challenge, but what's really important is that we get real good community input into this. It's like they were getting like hundreds of submissions, like every submission deadline, and we're like, how are we going to review all of this? How are we going to make the right choices to grow the Stellar ecosystem? There's no other answer than actually leveraging the community and ecosystem themselves. So that's how the Stellar Community Fund was born. And in actually a few days from now, April 17th, 2019, so that's almost 5 years. It's very exciting.
Crazy.
I know like time has flown. And so I guess like, because I mentioned I started in 2020, but I didn't really work on the community fund yet. It was more like Zach and also Tyler, who is still at the Stellar Development Foundation. I really started working on it in 2021, 2022, I think, when I started fully focused on the Stellar Community Fund and starting to grow the ecosystem more. And we changed from, I guess, like we had like a few rounds a year
Two rounds, I believe, right?
Yeah, 2 rounds. At like one point there was 3 rounds sometimes, and there was around, I guess, like a few $1 million per year distributed to projects, and it was pretty great. I mean, we had like this. It's more like a contest almost,
right?
Where like we had like a long submission deadline if everyone could like submit. There was like a nomination of not nomination, but there was like a discussion period, and then there was like a community vote, and then like we had a given like I guess a treasury, not treasury, but like a pool of funding that was being sent out.
It was fixed.
It was a fixed pool. And then like the top voted projects would get then the grant funding. We actually changed, I think like it was like more like, first it was per vote allocated, which wasn't as good because like sometimes we had like, you know, larger companies that were getting like a tiny bit of funding, and just like single developer project that were getting like $100,000 or something, which is like
pretty nice.
It's nice, it's not bad, but it's also like there was like it wasn't as like as great. I mean, you know, like when it comes to like community vote, it's not easy to reflect community sentiment, and that's why I think like later, I think it might have been SCF 8, I think. Like, yeah, that's when I kind of took over from Tyler as well, and Tyler started to focus on Stellar Quest. We focused toward like USD budgets. So like a project could then request a budget up to a certain amount in like USD worth of excellence, and then they could set out the deliverables and say like, okay, this is what I need in order to do X. And this was actually like a revolutionary way of looking at it, because now actually they could know what they were supposed to build and get the budget for it, and then next time they were, I guess, like applying, or they were, you know, wanting to showcase what they had built, and say like, okay, we got this and we did this, and they were able to complete their deliverables. So yeah.
So just to add like a bookmark, Tyler, who's now a developer advocate, I guess evangelist, he's doing community calls, the Stellar Quest and developer games. So before you took over, he was leading the program.
Yeah. And before him, it was actually Zach. It was interesting because actually Tyler is a Stellar Community Fund winner. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Everybody, oh God, I just like, it's that one project of his.
Okay. Color Glyph?
Yeah, Color Glyph was one of his projects.
Okay.
That won like an SCF award. There was like, I think some others as well. Yeah, I mean, Tyler was a long-term builder before he joined, and then they actually like ended up taking over part of the Stellar Community Fund. He pioneered a lab fund, and there was like also a seed fund, where lab fund like was like for like more like smaller project, and seed fund was for large companies. And that was SCF 7, the seed fund, which was super interesting actually, because then like we were starting in a bull market, and then what year
was that? 2021, 20?
That was, I think, 21.
Okay.
Yeah, 2021 SCF 7 seed round, where now like because we were. That was still when we had a fixed pool of XLM, so I think maybe we had 5 million. Yeah. Anyway, I'll need to like double check what it was exactly. But yeah, like we had like 8 projects, and they each got around like $200,000-$300,000.
Wow, that's substantial.
I know, it was a good time. You know, it was really interesting to see like, whoa, this was like a pivotal moment. So that's when I went also in, and like we had the budget, because like USD budget, it just made sense in order to kind of keep things stable as well, and make sure that ecosystem projects got what they are like, got an amount that they expected to get as well, and then actually like create deliverables against that. Yeah.
It's funny how you mentioned like the time when it sort of picked up. My story with Stellar starts with like 2014, the first airdrop.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And I remember sort of playing around with it, but stopping. And then the moment I sort of restarted or thought about restarting was 2017. And again, that was a build challenge.
Yeah.
And what I saw was there are like submissions every 6 months, and there's like 20, 30 submissions, and like, I don't know, 10 of them being rewarded. That's a good percentage rate. Like
that's pretty decent.
Yes, if you submit, there's a high chance probability that you'll get it.
Yeah.
But then once I started digging in, the bull market happened, and then the number of submissions went up to like hundreds.
Oh yeah, there was like one that got like 600, like it's a large amount of submissions. The interesting thing is like, there's such opaque award reporting on this that I have been digging.
You're not able to find that?
I'm not able to find it.
Oh,
and
wow.
like I asked the person who like managed it, they have no idea, because it was several years ago when I started to dig.
It just gets lost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still like kind of like, I just actually finished like logging, make sure all the payments from like, because I had it from like when I started working, but not before that, because it was all just like in random places. Put it in a spreadsheet, and it's now available on communityfund.stellar.org/stats. And you're going to see like everything that has been funded by SCF, SBC.
Right.
Another
Stellar Build Challenge.
Stellar Build Challenge. That's another quest that I will go on in the next few months on trying to see like.
You'll start digging out that data.
I know
it's all on chain though, like the allocation.
It is, but it's like it's interesting. It's a complicated story.
We went through like 7, 8, 9,
yeah.
And then things really changed at 12.
I would say so. Yeah.
I intimately remember 12 because I was. It was like a private round.
Yeah.
And I was invited. That was like,
yeah.
Sort of after working for a few months, I was invited in that thing. Can you tell about like the process of going from Sorbonne-a-thon, which is like a first sort of public-facing Peer Sorbonne, to SCF grants every month?
Sorbonne-a-thon was actually part of the journey, right? Like we started thinking about, well, how can we actually like build this like a solid, like continuing and ongoing pipeline of awards and like grants that can support these projects building, right? And so like Sorbonne-a-thon was actually one of the first ways to kind of get something about quick and get like quick engagement and just get like see what people are building, because this is experimentation mode still. I think like late 2022, like early 2023, it was like it had just started, it was live, you know, people were excited, they were building, and it was more like experimentation mode. So like that's what Sorbonne-a-thon and a lot of Sorbonne hackathon or
Sorbonne hackathon.
No, there was something, and now I'm like, anyway.
The naming is difficult.
The naming was interesting. There were some interesting naming choices back in the day, but it was so interesting because like we were like with this challenge where we're like Stellar Community Fund was like biannual. And like we had fixed pools, and the competition like structure, like I mean, sometimes it funded good. Most of the time, it's funded the right projects, but there were also projects that didn't get funded that like we at least thought were like, oh, this actually could have been good for our ecosystem, but I don't know, somehow with the community vote, it didn't get voted in. And
wasn't Lobster and Keybase one of those winners for Stellar Build Challenge?
Yeah, they started in Stellar Build Challenge, and then they actually got continuous funding also within the Stellar Community Fund. Yeah.
But onboard people. Anyway, continue with the story.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about projects, like, guess what? The oldest projects like that's still active in SCF, not SBC. Stellar Python SDK by Overcat.
You're for real?
Yeah, that was their first, is the longest running SCF project that's ever been awarded in, that's first been awarded in SCF. Anyway.
That's pretty unique. Like, obviously again, we're sort of jumping around a little bit, but the categories that you guys fund is like very, very varied. But so you decide to come up with this structure for SCF number 12 as a test for like a fast iterative cycle.
SCF 12 was a pilot because we were like, well, I also thought about a lot of how can we do this? How can we make this ongoing? How can we move away from the competition structure and make sure that each round we actually award the projects that make the most sense to fund for the ecosystem, that might have the most ecosystem value. But I still, and this is to date, I know that some of our team were like, okay, we're going to move more centralized and more closed off, and I was like, no. Stellar Community Fund, there's community in Stellar Community Fund. We cannot take community out of Stellar Community Fund, right? I said that many times now.
It's difficult to imagine that even be a conversation, but...
Well, it was, because it was actually very difficult to imagine how can we move from this more free-form competition style community vote model to an actually very dependable, very fast-moving, ongoing grants program. And so I was like, that's also what we were thinking. I was like, well, they were like, can we do monthly? I was like, yes, we can do monthly. I was initially thinking bi-monthly, 2 months, but they were like, okay, let's do monthly. I was like, sure, let's just do it.
You can do it.
I was like, I'll figure out a way, And then there was so monthly rounds make sense, and we have to have shorter review rounds, because initially we had review rounds that were a month long, because everyone had to go on the same page. I was like, well, we have to have dedicated reviewers. We cannot have 40, 50 people reviewing.
The round number 12, since I was lucky enough to be invited to submit, and it was back then a project with the name Use Sorbonne.app.
Yeah.
I remember that voting sheet. And there were, I believe, 8 lines in that document. So it was a very small group. And what did you learn from that SCF 12, which was an invite-only round?
Yeah, well, we validated that the kind of a new structure that we spun up in honestly very short time, that it actually worked, and that this is something that we could continue.
Right.
Because from the very first round, we already introduced both kind of SDF and community reviewers, and this was something that we've already done within SCF 10 and 11. But now we actually were okay, this is a thing, and we're going to also compensate them, because this is real work that's being done. This is this not just those 8 submissions were nice, but it was actually we were expecting hundreds of submissions in the coming year. So it worked.
It worked. So you were happy. You funded the initial round, and then the clock starts ticking again.
The clock starts ticking
for the next round.
Yeah.
And then it's a public round.
Then it was a public round. So then we opened up the floodgates. We actually changed our new platform, because I think we used a plethora of different platforms throughout.
Yes.
I'm still am I changed again?
So some of that data is lost forever, probably.
No, I made very good about it now, because I finally have a team, so I finally have somewhat enough bandwidth to kind of keep a program like this going. And
I think that's something we can touch on as well, but
yeah.
So 13 is the first public.
Yeah, first public round.
And then how many submissions do you get? It was a total of less than 100?
We got a lot. No. I believe we got over 100. That was our largest round.
13 was the largest round?
Yeah, because everyone was waiting
okay.
for to submit to this public round. I think we got the most submissions. But from then on, I think the acceptance rate was very similar to every round. So I think maybe the quality of it wasn't as great, but I think we got over 100 submissions. I'll double check on the data though. Then kind of going into and then we went monthly. It was just moving very fast. We added we had a community vote. We had that's because we had a first community vote in SCF 13, because in SCF 12 we started the 10% and then the 90% model, where they first they apply, they get their 10%, then they're building their first deliverable, and if all looks good, they're going to pitch the 90% against the rest to the wider community. And so the first community vote round was actually in SCF 13. Yeah.
I do remember vividly the structure of 10 and 90 and having to deliver the pitch. And from the perspective of someone that's applying, you better believe that was the most stressful period of time. And I remember I did Paris Blockchain Week with Tyler, and then the demo went great. And then a day later, I was online streaming a live demo of app for
that was kind of crazy.
for Stellar Community Fund.
Yeah.
And it was way more stressful on the Stellar Community call than it was on the stage.
Really?
Yeah, it was. It's just that the stakes are so much higher.
Right.
And you're a new participant, and you sort of you got to empathize with that mind state. You don't know nobody. You don't know the states.
Yeah.
So with these rapid rounds, what you had is a lot of time that you had to dedicate, and it was just you supervising it.
Yeah.
How many rounds was it just you supervising it? It was 3 or 4?
No, actually, we started I believe getting a contractor really onto it, which was Gemma actually, in the summer.
Okay.
So it was actually a good 6 rounds, I think, that I was just me cramming around data. And this is interesting because every round adds more data, and so the rounds build upon one another, where there's more there's again resubmissions. They all need to get their feedback. Luckily, honestly, the operations part, is definitely it's a whole day job. That's what Gemma's really focused on. She's doing a killer job at.
She is, and
I'm very happy right now, because it makes me able to actually think outside of the operations on how does this fit into a larger strategy. But yeah, in terms of the community has just been amazing about, because what I was worried about most was oh my God, we have literally these biannual rounds. There was 2 community votes in a year that people had to care
disperses.
about.
The community disperses.
I know, which did, and could definitely speed it up. But I was every month, is this going to be too much? Are we going to lose people? And we did lose I think a bit of voters in terms of but actually most people really stayed, and they were really excited, and they actually continued to stay engaged every single month. And luckily we did like disperse. It was like, we didn't like invite the same person every like month for panel review, because that would have been too tiring. Because like people have like real jobs, and like projects to work on.
Projects to work on.
Yeah, but honestly, the community has been fantastic and kind of supporting this whole like new changes and supporting smart contracts. They're very excited about this, and yeah, like from the summer on, like we actually we had a new contractor come in, which allowed me to think a bit more about the strategy and kind of, okay, great, now that I'm not like, running, having lava behind me and I have to keep running, and but actually my shoes or like whatever, my bike, like my tires are getting more burned up, and like I'm actually going slower and slower, like, but I'm trying harder, to move forward. I could actually take a break, and then, well, not a break obviously, but because like there was onboarding for Gemma, but at least like the load was shared in terms of the operations, which allowed us to think a bit more strategic. Was like, okay, what are the changes that we need to make and to move forward? One of the biggest issues with the 10%, like the proof of intent, which is what's called, and the 90% is that once people passed the 10%, they already had the feeling of, oh, they already got the 90%. And so that is not the case, because it still needed to be reviewed by community vote. And there were some projects like that we, got an outrage of, and it was difficult to not approve that second thing, even though like sometimes like it didn't really make sense to begin with, right? Because like we had a discrepancy, like first like the panel review takes a look at your project, and then the community is like, wait a minute, like something didn't, should have gone in panel review, and it's like we need to separate these two. They're separate things, and I think the community vote, what really helped was that they actually already built something. This was very different from like pre like 2023. So now the community can actually say like, okay, with the new like 50K and like 100K division that we have now, the community knows like, well, they have had time to build like somewhat of an MVP or something substantial that we can now review, and that made it a lot easier, at least like on the community, to say that, because we're also mostly developer focused, like we can actually look at code in most cases to like, okay, these people like have a good idea, they have like, they seem like having good technical like traction, and that was the biggest, I think, change that we made, along with a new website and I guess decentralized governance.
Many changes involved in that transition.
SCF 5.0, yeah.
When you think about community involvement, and this is sort of one of the things that, like you mentioned, helps you scale your efforts, because you can't hire everybody that you need if you don't have like the infinite resources. So with community involvement and like people contributing, also submitting, and then they're also voting, there's also a fear and maybe a risk of that becoming sort of like a, I'm familiar with these people, I'm going to vote for these people, or like, there's a dislike of whatever. Is that a risk that you think about? How do you think about that?
Yeah, obviously you think about that, right? Most of our community right now are projects, because these are the people that care.
Right.
These are the people that have stake into something. Like we don't have a token holder community. Like it's not based on like token holding. So it's based on project building. Maybe having future grants. Like you want to keep involved with the ecosystem and support the ecosystem so that you get more opportunities as your project, as well as like a higher reputation that can just like help build your your overall presence. And so like when I think about like having, I guess like it's kind of a conflict of interest.
Yeah, a little bit.
We have seen it a bit, but honestly, because of the transparency and because of like we are like, they're not like, we have actually somewhat open conversations. Like obviously not like to public, but within our kind of communities, and you can join them, etc. There is like a level of accountability that you have as a community member.
Yeah.
And people will notice if, let's say, you make the same type of like decisions or put the same things out and are actively voting for something else, or like having a conflict of interest. But to be honest, like the Stellar community, like it's pretty nice.
It's pretty nice. It's a pretty nice group of people.
Like they're not like, because like let's say like there's financial protocols like SourceSwap, and they're like also evaluating other financial protocols as well. And when you give feedback, you have to be very objective. Sometimes it's your friend, maybe sometimes it's your competitor, but at the end of the day, like we're all building the Stellar ecosystem, and we need to support one another and also be critical of projects that are not giving ecosystem value. And I think like, I mean, it's not easy, but I do believe we have made progress into that. And we are like doing a decent job. We can be better, but
it's a good mix.
yeah.
And it's not unique to like the Stellar Community Fund or like the blockchain.
I know, yeah.
Y Combinator has the same issue where it's like the founders that were successful and were funded, they're repeat founders.
Yeah.
You would be surprised at the number of like YC founders getting second or third
I'm sure of it.
applications. And then initially when they started the first couple of batches, Paul Graham and Jessica Simpson, I believe, or Thompson, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, but they were literally cooking dinner for the first batches, eating with them and developing relationships, like literally like family almost. And you like on one hand, you got to be afraid and careful, like too familiar, and you're going to be biased. But at the same time, if it's good people, and you're growing that bond, the people that were involved with Y Combinator in 2007 are still involved with Y Combinator in 2024. So it's I think it's a good mix, and like you said, the community is pretty good. It's nice. When you compare communities, and like we say, Stellar Community is pretty nice. What do you look at when like we have a Discord, we have a Twitter, we have a Reddit. When you look at other chains and you try to learn from them, what do you look at?
I mean, I see like in terms of like, I feel like alignment and incentives, like what are people saying and kind of what are the conversations about, right? And it's like, well, if the conversations are a lot about price or like are all about like NFTs or like what does the incentives look like? It's very different than like say like if the conversations are more like technical and like more in depth about governance. Like you can clearly tell when a community really wants to improve itself. When those like there's like I mean the example that I had today, if you're talking about other ecosystems, that I mentioned during the panel was about Arbitrum, which is very interesting actually. I just need to learn more. I just want to like really get to the bottom of everything. But basically, I mean like early 2023, like I think it was March or something, like there was like this one proposal, like it was like I think like to distribute about 750 million ARB to like the foundation to do like a bunch of admin operations, but also some grants. And like people were like, wait a minute, this is not okay.
Doesn't pass the smell test.
It doesn't pass the smell test. People woke up.
They
were like, hey, this is not okay. And turns out it was actually they already started distributing. This was just like a kind of like they already thought they had.
They got the keys, right?
They had the keys. So this was like a wake-up call where it's just like people like started to wake up, and that's actually. When you look at some of the governance discussions now, it's so much more sophisticated because they're now like building a grant style. They're like making sure they are reporting. They actually have a very nice dashboard now that exactly says each individual payment that has been sent. And so like when communities start to think like this, like more sophisticated and trying to like really like have a metrics driven kind of decision making on like what the governance decisions are going to be or like what the direction overall will be. That's what I think like you're starting to have more mature communities, and that's when things are like the alignment, the incentive alignment is much more long term rather than like some of the communities here that are much more short term incentive alignment oriented, like like the next pump and dump token, the next meme coin here and there, which is like, I mean, it's they're moving on hype, whereas like people that are actually trying to actively bootstrap an ecosystem and they're really serious about it. And luckily, like there's been some wake up calls, during the bear market and kind of like moving into this.
That's
new
always
era.
a good wake up call.
I know it is good, and then kind of seeing people like really bootstrap that and being serious about it and having like really in-depth conversations, really in-depth governance conversations. They're all public. I think that's a sign of having more maturity.
A good community.
Yeah, a good community.
What do you think? Like when the pendulum swings, and there are some people. I personally in the community, I noticed this where they start treating stellar funds as if they're like the last money on earth, and like we've got to be very, very precious. Because there's a balance, right? You cannot spend like you're a drunk sailor, but at the same time, there's time is the currency. And if you take too long, if you're too careful, how do you regulate that pendulum?
I mean, it's a balance, right? I mean, the pendulum is balance.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like
Do you think it's where is it at right now with Stellar?
I mean, not bad.
Not bad, okay.
We can be better. I think we can do more.
So in the faster direction or in the slower direction?
I would say like in the faster direction.
Okay.
because like here's the thing, right? I mean, not in terms of not necessarily faster, not necessarily like less like thought.
No.
Like definitely like a lot of thought. It's important. Like you have to hit a minimum balance, but we cannot be too careful. We
Yes.
cannot be too scrutinized because like the thing is when projects first start out, like
You
they're
don't know.
ideas. Like they just need to like experiment, they need some money, they just need to start building. And then like that's what the activation award does. Like they can actually validate that use case, and then after that they know much more about what they're actually going to do. But that initial 50K, like you cannot just do days and weeks and like months of review, like, oh, are you going to be good? Because you don't know. And even if the team seems good and the market does some weird things and like let's say like some tech or there's some regulation issue happens, it can still all change, and we cannot know what's going to happen. So you just have to like have some kind of initial say like, okay, this is like feels like a good balance. This is enough review. Let's say you look like you're doing a good job. There can be an exception here or there that is just like, we missed, but whatever. We shouldn't build for exceptions in that case. We should build for moving forward very fast, iterating very fast, failing very fast, and then do a lot of different approaches. So one thing that I want to try with the Stellar Community Fund, that I've seen in other ecosystems as a trend, which I didn't get to mention during my trends panel because I was more about it, it was interesting, is actually this idea of like a plural approach, like more is more in terms of like different ways of trying to get grant funding out.
Different tracks,
different events, different like getting people in all kinds of the way. And then like what we are doing right now is like have like a wide funnel. So they have like hackathons, you have like grant programs, and then you kind of funnel people in, and then we have like, the Stellar Community Fund is where you can, you're getting serious, all right, let's actually see if you can validate your use case. Going through that. After that, it's a really interesting journey where it's like we're trying to work with accelerators now. So this year, I am very sure that we're going to work with an accelerator to actually support startups to grow their journey and hopefully make it into like our investments.
And just to be clear,
well.
an accelerator is something like a Techstars.
Something like a Techstars.
Okay, so like a multi-month program.
Not necessarily, but it can differ.
Okay.
But I think like we're probably looking for a little bit more Web3 oriented partners as well that have just done very well with other ecosystems.
There are some famous accelerators on Web3.
Yeah, so that's just a teaser.
Okay.
Something's going to happen.
No names.
We're actually hiring for someone
okay.
right now. I'm trying. But it's going to be very exciting. So having those programs actually is the one missing step that I see going from SCF to investments. And then also like grants, like they fund like a plethora of like the ecosystem projects, like from like infrastructure, content, events. So we need to have different types of programs that support these individual projects so that the entire ecosystem can thrive. It's like a program or initiative approach, and not just within the Stellar ecosystem, but we need to go outside of the bubble also to have like multiple communities building and integrating on Stellar.
I used this example with Tyler earlier today where we have this sort of a high commitment business use case validated thing, which is Stellar Community Fund, and you sort of have to prove yourself that this is sustainable. But there's also this case where some people just want to experiment with tiny little things, and it doesn't require 150K. It's probably like 15K level, and you can do like, or 5K, and do a lot of that, and then you don't put like those people in the same category, and you have to pitch and all of that stuff. So the tracks idea, I'm a huge fan of, and gaming as a vertical. I keep preaching this on the community Discord, where it's like, fund 500 indie game devs with like 20 to 50K, you'll get 5 to 10 great games, and that's going to be a killer thing. When you think about a life cycle of a startup, you have your grant, which is probably like an activation is a beautiful term for that. Then you get into like the continuation, the community award, and then you reach this sort of let's say a bottleneck, right? Which is seed and then onward. What do you have in mind for that going into the future?
I mean, that's what I mentioned earlier as well. Like it's really interesting where it's just like, well, I think in general, I mean, especially in previous years, we've seen people build solutions and then think about what their solution can solve.
Right, which is not good.
Which is not good, right? And it's like, I think like what the narrative and that I want to also like really strengthen within the Style Community Fund and kind of the programs that we're offering is like just like, you know, validate your use case. Just talk to users first. If you have an idea, just talk, get feedback about what your target audience could be, and then build something small, like an MVP, like really like a bare bones spreadsheet, like
Sorbonne's on mainnet.
I know Sorbonne's on mainnet, but like try to build a hacky version first, like a hacky version, and then try it again, like get again, like, and have these cycles of just user feedback and user traction, and that way you already gain like early adopters or early on. And you build your product with a user-centric approach. I mean, users can be anything like developers or like end users or businesses, but at least like if you just build in the dark and you're just thinking, oh, this is a great idea, I'm just gonna, you know, like just spend months and months building.
Or years.
Because like you think it's never good enough. And then when you get to the point like, this is pretty decent, let me talk to users. And then you end up like the users don't need your product and it ends up failing, right? And this happens like way too much in Web3, I think. And especially because like people think new tech is tech first, but no, it should be user first. And you're using the tech to solve the problems of your target audience.
There's probably a better feeling for a startup person than seeing someone else use your product. Recommend your product, and then you start scaling. That's like that feeling I would recommend to anyone that's trying, get to that point as fast as you can.
As fast as you can.
As fast as you can.
I mean, this is what Y Combinator says too. Like, I went to the startup school like a few years ago, and it's just like, build something super fast. I mean, that's why we have the Activation Award. 1 month, 1 to 1.5 months. That's all you need.
That's all you need.
You know, you get 50K, like knock yourself out, build like a very bare bone, like even like an MVP on Stellar, and then get some initial traction, get community feedback. Like the community, you can leverage it to actually give you some initial feedback. You can go out to like users, and that's what we also have the Startup Bootcamp for, so that they actually, you know, get that like idea of I need to talk to people about this. I need to get as much feedback as possible in order to develop the product.
When you think about the community, we have a community of eager people that are one thing like, please give us something to use. We're going to use it. Sorbonne domains got launched.
I know. That just got like boom. I mean, I was like, woo! Like I just like the same day I was just like registering. It was like, you know what, $140 I think was around like the amount that we had to like I guess put in.
Cheap.
It wasn't cheap, but I was like, you know what, I don't care if I lose it or not. I mean, it's probably horrible, but I was like, I just really want this right now.
It's an eager community of users.
I mean, and it's so awesome because now that you see, like, because it was .e forever, and like I was like so against it because I was like, you know what, I'm Stellar first, you know, like I'm not gonna get this until, and then I just saw that pop up, and it didn't even get funded because like Enrique is building like FX DAO, and so like was like, hey, this is a need, let me just spin it up real quick, and it just got adoption like that, right? And it's just like really exciting to see things like that, and then also like
could be a good example for whenever you think about a submission for the community fund. Does it pass the Sorbonne domains adoption test? Where it's like, is there an excited community behind it and using it already? And I mean, it's not rocket science that we're building. Some of it is probably, but so the life cycle, right? We got seed, a problem that was very prevalent in like the industry in 2022. When the sort of the bear started, it was very hard. You had a ton of startups at Series A raise a huge amount of money, bad valuations, and they were dying, right? There was no one to fund B. You can, if there's no pipeline, you can maybe see SCF startups reaching that point where it's like, we need a follow-on. What do we do? Is there a plan in the future to like create a pipeline? Because there's a VC arm at Stellar. Can you talk about that?
I can definitely talk a bit about that. I mean, in terms of like the journey, also what was Daniel like presented. Like you can, you know, if we start from the very early stages. I mean, people come in at every stage. But if you start at the very early stages, it's just like even like hackathons, right? And then you just go SCF, you start building out your product. And it's like, okay, well maybe you start like an accelerator program like we did with Techstars or MoneyGram that can get you like that growth or go-to-market aspect, and then you can be to the point like, well, actually, like you can go to the matching fund where you have like, if you have already some investor audience or like maybe introduced from the accelerator program, like Stellar can actually match those investments up to, I believe, 500K.
500K, yeah.
Yeah, which are investments. And then after that, if you grow even more, like there's an enterprise fund that gives out like several $1 million like per investment. Those are more of the larger dollar amounts. But there is like a really clear journey, I feel like, on Stellar, at least. I mean, and we're continuously reiterating to like make sure, like, especially like that step from SCF to like the kind of investment team, like how can we fill that to make sure that these startups are supported enough and that they can actually take those steps and not like die right after that or die right after their, let's say, first investments. And yeah, I mean, I think it's part of like people learn, right? It's like you don't need to raise like, just get traction quick.
Yeah.
Like you need to be crafty here. Like you cannot just be luxurious like, oh, you know, I'll start doing something when I have like a couple $1 million raise. No, that's not how it works, because when we do hit the bear market or something like this again, like you need to be prepared. You need to have your own traction, you need to have a validated use case, and kind of going this route with the grant funding, and it actually allows you to get there a lot faster than, let's say, if you were just to go like, you know, I have a great idea, let me get some VC funding. Yeah, because you run out real fast.
And I mean, you're not going to be as appealing as someone in a position that's already got users and slides with charts that go up like that. I remember the analogy with Paul Graham in the early days when they were like, their startups were trying to raise funds, VCs were rejecting them. Paul Graham would email those VCs directly, trying to push them towards like understanding and seeing what they were missing. Is there a Rolodex at Stellar, a network of VCs that you have some familiarity with, that there's a potential for you guys to do that?
Yes, for sure. So like as I mentioned, like the matching fund, which Jerry from our team like leads, he has like a number of like the investors and like VCs that are really like have already co-invested in Stellar Ventures, and so like that number, that network actually keeps growing. And I think, I mean, as someone else mentioned on the panel, like last year was kind of like the amount of funding that was invested like went really down. It was like we hit an all-time low basically in terms of that. Like, I mean, especially when you see like 2021 and 2022 numbers, which were very high. I think like what PitchBook mentioned was like $45 million of a billion.
Yeah.
I know, billion is like 1,000. It's crazy, those numbers. But and then like a lot less when you saw it like in 2023. But it has already taken an uptick in 2024. Especially also with like kind of like bull market kind of going on right now, but more so in terms of like I think that bear market in 2023 like just like cut out a lot of other projects that might not have
zombie projects,
and then like the real projects, like I mean real world like utility projects, I would say they sustain, like they already have used, they were able to kind of survive that. And then yeah, I think it is just a market maturing, so I think there will be even more investor interest, and we will already see it here at Paris Blockchain Week, and especially with Stellar, with the Soroban now on mainnet, with our growing DeFi ecosystem. It's going to be very interesting, especially if we have accelerators, like we'll be able to like really network.
That's an exciting
more
development for sure.
Yeah.
So lastly, sort of cap this off, into the future 24, we're at the end of quarter one, starting quarter two.
Yeah.
It's looking good. Right now, things are looking good. Do you see it continuing on this trend? Do you see rocky waters ahead? What should people prepare for the end of the year?
Yeah. Well, this is the first year that we're actually having a team for SCF, which means that we can do a lot more.
Yeah.
So right now, as I mentioned, like in the trend of like just the space, there's this plural approach, like of doing more, like different ways, diversify the ways that projects are being supported. And this is similarly what we're going to do, or what I hope to do with the Stellar Community Fund. And I've been already in talks, we've been already in talks in the community, and soon there will be an official proposal and we can vote on that. So definitely having more ways that really meet the needs of the ecosystem projects in order to have them go to market. Last year, development focused, like we were on testnet, we were just like really building, experimenting.
Breaking.
Oh my gosh, it was You know, like, I mean, I really commend like the project building on Soraban. Like,
it was an experience.
It was a little bumpy ride, but now we're like on track. And
Yeah.
we're on mainnet, and now we are in the position that a lot of these projects are now going to market. Like from like just building for like a while, and now they're going to market. And so they'll need like liquidity support. They'll need like infrastructure credit. So like that's like how the Stellar Community Fund will then continue to evolve to really meet these needs of the ecosystem, as well as like new accelerator programs, because as I mentioned, go to market, like people need to find ways to grow. And I think like accelerator programs and incubator programs, you have to make sure that you have the right one, because they can really make or break the startups.
Yep.
And that's why we never started too early on them, because also that's why I want to make sure that we have dedicated people that can really work with the startups and identify like what makes the most sense for them. But that will also help kind of getting them even further into their growth journey. And then obviously decentralized governance,
which you have not touched yet.
I know, because like I can talk forever about SCF. It's my life.
Thank you, Anke.
Yeah.
We'll see you online.
Well, it was a pleasure as always. Our biggest Stellar Community Fund supporter is right here on stage.
Thank you so much.
If only you had that shirt on yesterday. All right, thank you.
Bye.